I did put a message in the chat for everyone, especially if you joined late, that there'll be time for questions at the end and that there will be a recording with all of Cece's slides and links to her sources that will be coming to you as soon as it's available.
Thank you,
All righty. Hello, and thanks for joining us today. My name's Deb Hodgson. I'm co-founder of New Hampshire for Safe Technology, along with Jen White and Lori Schreier. And my unplanned journey over the past 6 years is what has led me here today. In the fall of 2017, we had scheduled to have our home measured for wireless on our return from a hiking trip out west. I had planned to come off blood thinners, and I was aware that wireless could thicken the blood, so I thought that perhaps that was a prudent precaution to take. I had also been having issues with insomnia, constant ringing in the ears, heart arrhythmia, palpitations, tooth and jaw pain, dry eye, facial flushing, dizziness, and blood pressure issues. I had developed severe pressure headaches that felt like my brain was swollen or on fire. I had great difficulty thinking, speaking, and remembering. I even got lost several times in the town I've lived in for nearly 40 years. I didn't yet know that it was all related until we removed the wireless from our home and cars. My health quickly improved. My seemingly unrelated symptoms disappeared as well. Interestingly, the plant in my kitchen that had sat there doing nothing for over a year suddenly grew 15 inches in just 2 months. That was an eye-opener to everyone in the family, as it's much easier to believe what you can actually see. Realizing this is an issue that ultimately affects everyone, I stepped way out of my comfort zone with a little push from reading EMF Off by Olga Sheehan and the support of Cece, despite knowing others will certainly think I must be crazy. I held 2 public screenings of Generation Zapped and reached out to many legislators. My state rep, Patrick Abrami, was truly exceptional. He actually listened and responded. He investigated the science. Then he and New Hampshire State Senator Tom Sherman together were successful getting New Hampshire to pass the first U.S. law to begin addressing technology safety. The New Hampshire Commission on Health and Environmental Effects of Wireless Technology was established in the fall of 2019 and produced a groundbreaking report in the fall of 2020. The New Hampshire Commission report is a great place to become informed, to empower you to protect yourself, your family, and your community by becoming aware and learning how to use technology safely. We at New Hampshire for Safe Technology, along with Cece Doucette of Mass for Safe Technology, are supporting the Commission's work through community information sessions like this. And we thank you for being here. Our speaker today is Cece Doucette. Cece has been a tireless supporter to us in New Hampshire and everyone on this issue, and we're grateful to her. Welcome, Cece.
Thank you so much, Deb. You have been so generous with your time, not only in what you've done in your community and for your family, but also what you have done with the legislature. You volunteered your time to take the minutes at the 13 meetings that they held when they were investigating the wireless issue. And we'll give folks some good information on that project too. And you haven't stopped. You know, these issues are hard to work with. And some days we all just want to curl up in a ball and never get out of bed. But like Sydney, who's over there smiling, because I know she's been battling out in California this week too. We're just grateful because there's no cavalry coming to fix this issue. So let's get into what this issue really is for those who may be new to the conversation. And I'm going to do a screen share and I'll go through a set of slides. And as Deb noted, once we are done with this webinar in the coming days, we will get the recording and then we will send out the recording and my slides. So I like to say, don't take our word on any of this. It sounds wackadoo to say that there's something wrong with wireless, but when we take the time to investigate and look at the facts, so many things start adding up in our world. So thank you for joining us. We'll spend the next hour, hour and a half going through some of the facts. And as Deb noted, we'll do a Q&A at the end. So please hold your comments. I just popped something into the chat saying, please let us know where you're from and how you found us. That helps us to know whether the outreach that we're doing out in our communities is working or not. So any feedback you can give us is great. We kind of like to keep the chat quiet as we're presenting though, so that folks can have their undivided attention on the information. So I'm Cece Doucette. That MTPW after my name just means I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University. And I did my undergraduate there in communications. And never in a million years did I imagine I would be using this skill set for safe technology advocacy, but I'm grateful. So how did I get involved with this? When my kids were in school, it was at the time when the wireless industry and, ed tech were pushing in this 21st century classroom. And I live in a small town in Ashland, Massachusetts, and our budgets had been cut to the bone year upon year. And we simply didn't have the money for everything that the industry was telling us our kids would need to succeed in the world. So good doobie parents, we jumped in and started doing fundraisers. We got wireless infrastructure in our schools. We got iPads and Chromebooks and smartboards and minis and Apple TVs. And all this stuff we thought was going to give our kids an edge in the world. Then one night at book group, my girlfriend Wendy, who's an electrical engineer, tipped us off that she was reading a book called Zapped by Anne Louise Gittleman. And in Zapped, Wendy was figuring out that wireless is not harmless. So I made a mental note of it. And then not long after that, something crossed my desk. And at that time, I was the grant coordinator for our school district. And I literally had been running campaign after campaign to get all this tech in. And then I see something from the American Academy of Environmental Medicine. Now, these are the doctors who get the conundrum cases that regular doctors are not trained to treat, that deal with sicknesses that come from exposures in our environment. So this environmental medicine group of doctors was putting out a position statement to school superintendents saying, do not bring wireless in. And I went, what? After I'd spent 8 years doing this. And so I just thought, I wonder if there's any science to this. And I'm a tech writer, so I just said, where's the science? And so I just went looking. And folks, I was astounded that you don't even have to look very far. You just need to know to look. And you will find literally thousands of peer-reviewed studies all over the world showing extensive biological damage from today's wireless tech. So we'll walk you through the science on that. So I started sharing my findings with my schools, and I was getting back crickets. And I'm over here scratching my head. I thought it would be like if we had a gas leak in the science lab at school, we would certainly evacuate the building and not let anybody back in until it was safe. But we got back crickets. So I started sharing my findings with the chairwoman, Lori Tosti, of our school committee, who raised 4 kids. She's an attorney. She's a yoga instructor, just a combination of really amazing background. She and I start passing stuff back and forth. Like, did you see that in 2008, the French National Library took wireless out because of the health risks? Did you see there are pockets in Italy and Germany and Belgium who are already figuring out wireless does not belong in schools and they're taking it out? So it became a very difficult conversation because we have to remember that by now everybody has integrated cell phones and routers and all this other stuff into their lives. And they were afraid of getting sued. But when they read the legal fine print, and we'll walk you through that in a minute, we became the first in the United States to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms with best practices for mobile devices. And there's a lot of stories that go along with this one that you can reach out to me later for. If you want to talk to your schools, I can guide you. But turn off the devices when not using them. The industry gives them to us with all antennas full tilt all the time. Turn the Wi-Fi on only when needed. Those wireless access points are extraordinarily toxic. And it says right in the fine print, don't put this on your body. Always place the device on a solid surface, because otherwise you're going to exceed the government guidelines for radiation. So we'll walk you through that fine print, but this is where my start began in 2013 before we got this little sign in our classrooms in 2015. And then I went to Senator Karen Spilka, who's my senator here in Ashland. She and I had worked together on these campaigns to bring all this wireless tech in. And by then I had purchased a radio frequency detection meter, and I had shown her the radiation from her cell phone, and I showed her district director the radiation from the laptop. And on my meter, both devices went right off the charts with radiation. And they're looking at me like, really? And I said, yes. And nobody knows. Is there something from where you sit up at the State House that we can do to at least give the public the right to know? Because, you know, adults will do what they do. They'll enjoy alcohol or drugs or tobacco or pornography or gambling. But there are great risks of addiction with all of those things, and they destroy lives. And the science now shows that microwave radiation, as transmitted from our wireless devices, also hits those same receptors in the brain as drugs and alcohol and all these other addictive substances. So Senator Spilka put me with an attorney in her office, and we very carefully crafted just a simple bill. Bring the right minds together at the state level. Let's look at this issue that's new to all of us, figure out what to do, and start protecting our loved ones, our children, our pollinators, and everything else that's being radiated today. So we became the first to have a bunch of these bills. We have 6 in the legislature this session. And then Deb had seen that we were doing a screening of this incredible award-winning film called Generation Zapped. We were doing it at a charter school here in Massachusetts up by the New Hampshire border. So Deb came down and watched it with us. And she was just so gratified to have a room full of people talking about this. Because when you first fall down the rabbit hole, it's a lonely journey. So please know, if you are electromagnetically sensitive, or if you're worried about what's going on in your home or your community or your family, you are certainly not alone. And we will give you so many terrific resources today to help you navigate through that. So Deb comes down, invites me up to do some screenings at her local library in Stratham, New Hampshire. And then she was connecting with her legislators. And when she talked to Representative Patrick Abrami, he's an engineer, and our engineers have only been taught you have to have heat from a device up to your head or your body before there can be any harm. Well, as we'll show you in the scientific literature, it has nothing to do with heat. Heat's bad enough, but the FCC allows public radiation way up here, and the harm is happening at hundreds of thousands of times below that. So Rep. Abrami's listening to Deb, and he's a good guy. And he went and did his research and had this major wow moment, like, wow, what have we done here? And Deb introduced me to Patrick Abrami. The 2 of them drove down from New Hampshire, and we sat at my kitchen table for an afternoon and helped him to connect the dots on this issue. And he wrote an incredible bill that we will review with you here today. And that's what it takes. It takes citizens learning and then being compelled to do the right thing, because there's no cavalry coming, but change happens when citizens get informed, inform those around them, and build that community that can then help empower our public servants to do the right thing. So I started with my schools. I went through the legislation, and on this amazing journey, I've had the privilege of meeting these world-leading scientists and doctors. One of them is Dr. Deborah Davis. She's a Nobel Peace Prize co-laureate on the climate change team. And she figured out what this issue is, and she's been on it since then. She introduced me to a group in Europe that was developing online courses so people could learn quickly. So I have worked with this team out of Europe, and we have co-founded a little nonprofit called Wireless Education. And we literally have off-the-shelf training. We can train your entire workforce. We can train your schools. We can train your municipality, your family, whoever. Anybody can take this little course for, I think it's like $15, which helps to pay our overhead. And we will do whatever it takes to get this into your schools. So please know the resources are here today, that we didn't have any of this 10 years ago when I fell down the rabbit hole. So I started connecting with others around Massachusetts. I went to the State House to ask for right to know legislation, and Dr. Davis brought her panel of experts. We had the retired president of Microsoft Canada, who's now speaking out about this issue. We had the gentleman from the government in India, Dr. Sharma, whose job is to recommend radiation levels. Theirs in India were way up here where ours still are today, and Canada's are still way up there, and many other countries. In India, they brought it down 90% on paper. At least that shows with political will, we can make some inroads. So Dr. Sharma, bless him, flew out on his own vacation time to join Dr. Davis to speak to our legislature. And we also had Dr. Catherine Steiner Adair, who's a child psychologist, and she got up to the podium at the State House and said, we are not raising our children properly anymore. They should have unstructured playtime. They should be out under the rhododendron, going into deeper and deeper levels of imaginative play, not in the shallows of a screen with not even evidence-based content. So what we're doing to this generation of kids is just unconscionable. But once we know better, we do better. And that's what we're hoping to inspire today, is to give you enough of the facts, to give you a comfort level, to do your homework on this issue, and then see where that leads you. So I connected at the State House with people from all over Massachusetts, and we established Massachusetts for Safe Technology. If you go out there, we have a lot of resources for you to tap into. We keep it nice and clean, lots of white space, so it doesn't overpower you just by looking at our website. So we try to keep it right to the point and allow you to drill through quickly to find what it is that you're looking for. So then somebody at the National Institutes of Health found my work and asked me if I would co-chair the technology panel for the Health in Buildings Roundtable Conference down at the NIH. And I said, I have a master's, I'm not a PhD, a terminally degreed, scholar. And they said, that's okay. We like the way you present information. I said, okay, if you'll have me, I'll come. And so we brought with us on this panel, Frank Clegg from Microsoft Canada, to say industry can absolutely do better if given a nudge. And it's our job to give that nudge. We had Martin Pall, who's one of the world's leading scientists in this, Dr. Martin Pall. And we had Peter Sullivan, whose work I found out on a YouTube video about autism. Peter was a fighter pilot like Top Gun. He was way up above the earth with the really high natural electromagnetic fields. He was in a plane that had radar on it and all the instrumentation panel with electromagnetic fields inside the plane. Well, Peter wound up getting very sick. He dropped significant weight. His teeth started getting brittle. And he finally figured out it was his radiation exposure. And he went on to become a Silicon Valley engineer. So he's friends with the guys who invented the cell phones and stuff. So he was pretty big up in there, but that didn't protect his health. And when his two little boys came into the preschool years, both of them were diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And I was astounded to hear in his talk that his boys are now grown young men who have successfully gone through college and are no longer on the autism spectrum. And I didn't even know that was an option. And we never, ever want to give false hope. Everybody's individual body is different and responds differently to genetics and environmental exposures. But Peter did what a lot of parents will do. They'll put a family member with autism on a clean organic diet. So we stop putting the environmental toxins in from the chemical industry. He did the heavy metal detox to pull all those toxins from the heavy metals out of the body. And then today he would say, first, do a digital detox. At least do 12 hours at night with no radiation in your home. so that the body can do proper cell repair and regeneration during the sleeping hours. So Peter was great to fly in to the National Institutes of Health and be on our panel too. And we had Theodore Scorado, who's the executive director of the Environmental Health Trust, which Dr. Davis, the Nobel co-laureate, founded. Theodora came to give us inspiration on what other countries are already doing. And they have a wealth of information at the Environmental Health Trust. We are way behind the 8 ball here in the US, where we have the manufacturers of this toxic equipment. So I like to share that link and give that brief overview about it, because what we have been conditioned to think by industry, as soon as we open our mouths and go, hey guys, there's something wrong with wireless, we've been conditioned to go, tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist, I ain't listening to this. So that's why I like to share these resources, especially that one at the NIH. Our talks were 10 minutes or less. So it's a very quick, highly credible way to establish that, yes, indeed, there is something to look at here. So please feel free to share these links. And one of the biggest gaps that we had when I first got going on this is we could tell so many children and adults were getting sick, but their doctors had no way of figuring it out. So people wind up going to their doctors, presenting their symptoms. The doctors run the tests they know to run, and then they come up empty. So then you wind up, as Deb did, going to specialists. You wind up spending thousands of dollars out of pocket. They run their tests and still they come up empty. So, or even worse, like they were prone to doing in certain cases with Lyme disease, which we now know more about biologically. But in the early days, a lot of people were being told by their health practitioners, because they couldn't find anything wrong with them, oh, it must be in your head, go see a psychiatrist. And this is a biological illness. So I am so very grateful to Dr. Lynn Patrick, who formed the first medical conference on this back in 2019, and then to Elizabeth Kelly, who's been in public health for decades, for picking up the reins and doing this EMF Medical Conference 2021. Let's just spend a moment talking about the alphabet soup that this issue comes with. EMF stands for electromagnetic fields of radio, in this case, of radio frequency microwave radiation. That's a lot of mouthful. Basically, it's what's invisible and pulsing out of every wireless technology that we have adopted, as well as the cell towers, the 5G small cells, and the utility smart meters, and the satellites that are going up in the sky. So EMF means electromagnetic fields, and Libby Kelly brought together world-leading doctors and scientists. That conference ran online for 2 years for 24.5 continuing medical education credits. That opportunity for the credits just expired in July. However, Libby has taken the entire content of the conference and put it online at no charge for any member of the public to access these expert lectures and to share them with your healthcare team, because doctors are so frustrated today that they're seeing people get sicker and sicker, and the things they've been trained to do are not helping. So we need to upgrade and update our training. So please share that link for the EMF Medical Conference. Okay, so what is the legal fine print that got my schools to put that sign in our classrooms? Anybody who's listening with this, if you have an iPhone, I invite you to take that out and go into settings, and I'm going to give you a little walkthrough. So while you do that, just know that this applies to every electronic device that has a radio frequency antenna in it. And our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have created this webpage called See the Fine Print. And you can go through and scan a variety of different wireless devices that have these disclaimers. And in the iPad, for example, it talks about seizures, blackouts, and eye strain. And I know personally of 2 children who had their first seizures while they were on their iPads. So this is so serious, folks, and we just need the balance of information. So in an iPhone, and if you don't have an iPhone, you could always look this up by doing the make and model of your phone and just typing in RF exposure for radio frequency. So from the settings, scroll down just a little bit and hit general. From general, go all the way down to legal and regulatory, hit that. And then on the next screen, about 4 items down, you'll see RF exposure, which is this radio frequency radiation that is actually two-way microwave radiation that sends and receives our signals and data. They politely call it energy, which it is. It's a form of man-made energy. And in that fine print disclaimer that's been in there all along to cover the industry's legal backside, it says a couple of really important things. One, this device was tested at a distance from the body. So if you're holding it in your hand while it's transmitting, if you're tucking it in your bra or your suit pocket or your shirt, or you're putting it in your yoga pants in the front, or you're sticking it in your back pocket, you are exceeding the Federal Communication Commission's public radiation limits for radiation. And worse, they were never biologically safety tested. So, like I said, they allowed this much radiation and the harm is happening at hundreds of thousands of times below that. So when we open this conversation, like I said, people have been conditioned to go tinfoil hat conspiracy theorists, but I'll tell you, when you show them the legal fine print in their own device, in their own hand, they get it and think, wow, maybe I should really kind of look at this issue. That's the first thing that I found to be very powerful in opening this conversation. The second thing is to show the radiation. So I'm going to stop my screen share for a moment and give us a demonstration of what this radiation looks like. So knowing what I know, and I circled my tail on this for quite some time. I didn't want to know it. It was part of our lives. But once I figured out what the science was really telling us and that I was seeing symptoms in my own home, I started reducing our exposures. And so now in my home, we can measure this and this device was recommended at the EMF medical conference. And in the scientific literature on the maximum spike of radiation that comes out, they want us to be at 10 or less. Right now, I'm in the green. I'm at 5. The unit of measurement is something called a microwatt per square meter. So basically in 3 feet of air, how much radiation are we being exposed to? So watch what happens when I take my cell phone out of airplane mode and my antennas are transmitting. I'm not doing anything. It's just the antennas coming online to make a handshake with the nearest cell tower. Oh, geez. I'm going to stop that. Oh, my. So hang on. Go back into airplane mode. Okay. So it was up in the extreme hot red area. And once I got rid of the radiation, I'm down into a safer green level. This went I was at 5 microwatts per square meter. This just went to 2,400,000 microwatts per square meter. And in the scientific literature, they want us to be at 10 or less in our sleeping areas, which is our homes. We shouldn't be at more than 100 indoors in general and no more than 1,000 outdoors, presuming you're not staying right under something that's radiating. So that's what I figured out. And we're going to teach you steps that you can take to get to those low levels in your own home and perhaps community at some point. Okay, so back to my slides. Sydney, can you give me a nod if you can see that? Okay, thanks, darling. So my mind goes towards solutions. We've got a problem. How do we fix it? First, we need to see it. So that's why I invested in one of these radio frequency detection meters. And then I knew we had a pot of money in our town that gets distributed out through our select board. That's our form of government, through a grant program. And so I went after a grant. I wrote up my application. I turned it in. They looked at it and went, we don't really know. Come back next time. 6 months later, I resubmit my application and they're like, this is probably more of a Board of Health issue. So they lobbed it over to the Board of Health. And I had already met with our health agent here in Ashland. He was around back in the 90s when the cell towers first started coming in. And he was told that here at the local level, we have to follow the state and the state has to follow the federal, and the federal was overtaken by the wireless industry or the telecom industry back in 1996 when they got in there and wrote the language in the Telecom Act of 1996 that says, gee, if there's any environmental concerns, you can't sue us. And a couple of the courts have kind of translated that environmental statement into meaning health as well. So that's how we got into this predicament with wireless radiation all around us. People think that there's not much they can do, but there's a ton that you can do personally. There's a ton that your town can do to protect your schools, your public spaces, and we'll teach you how to do that as well. So I went after that grant for the third time. And by then I had been presenting bills at the State House and testifying, and I could tell that not one single member of the Joint Committee on Public Health here in Massachusetts had any idea that this issue existed. Just looking at them as I'm testifying, you know, their eyes are like this. So I thought, well, a 3-minute testimony isn't going to cut it. So I made it a priority, much to my husband's chagrin, because I had already stepped away from my tech writing career when my daughter was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, and I left my profession to keep her alive. So she's a rock star. She manages her diabetes tremendously now. She's 29, just got engaged. And so I had told Steve, when the girls get out of school, I'll come back and start, you know, working full time again to put money toward our retirement. And then this issue found me. So I said, honey, you're not going to like this, but I got to get up to the State House and one by one educate those legislators, because nobody has a clue what's going on. And 3 minutes in a public hearing is never going to be enough. So that's what I've been doing ever since, is educating our legislators, educating towns, educating citizens, and making some good inroads. We haven't got it fixed by any means, but we became the first in the nation to have one of these meters on loan in our library when I sat down one by one with our select board members and taught them what this is. And then they voted on it and said, well, we'll give you 1 meter conditionally. I wanted 2. I wanted 1 to put in circulation at the library, and I wanted 1 to put in the schools. Just give 1 to the schools so they can measure and fix, measure and fix. But our select board members were still so hesitant on this that, you know, and I get it. It comes out of left field for all of us when we first learn about this. But they said, we'll give you $400 for 1 meter if the library agrees to take it into circulation. So then I had to go present to our trustees at the library, and there were 5 of them. One gentleman who sat there like this the whole time, and he just had hogwash written all over his face, you know. And then another one said, oh my gosh, let's do it. I want to take that home and see what's going on. And then a third one said, well, look, guys, regardless of how we feel personally, we are a conduit of information in our community as a library. So let's take a vote. And they did, and they voted 4-1 to put this library on loan. And so that became a really lovely pilot that others are now doing. A doctor and I went after a grant from our state level cultural council, and we got the one on the left is the Acoustimeter. That's a fine meter too. It's right on par with the Safe and Sound Pro 2, but the Pro 2 on the right is a little more current. You can plug that one in and charge it. You know, it's just got a few additional features. So we got one in Newton, and then out in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, Verizon came in and illegally put a cell tower on top of a neighborhood that made 17 children and adults so sick that they had to abandon their homes. So somebody talked to the Pittsfield Library, and now they have one on loan too. So there are things that we can do, and our local cable stations are wonderful. They are oftentimes the last bastion of independent reporting left in our country, because where we used to have 50 mainstream media outlets. Those have gotten bought up and bought up and bought up. And now it all funnels right into the same 4 to 6 huge corporate conglomerates that own the wireless industry and other big industries. And mainstream media doesn't do reporting on this anymore because they control the content. So bless our local cable stations. WACA-TV is mine here in Ashland, and they brought somebody into my home with their, professional equipment, and we did a 23-minute public service announcement. What does a house look like today? Where are these exposures? So you're welcome to watch that, and we offer suggestions for remediating. And then I was brought in by another advocate here in Massachusetts, Patricia Burke. She invited me to join her for some interviews at WCCA-TV in Worcester, Massachusetts, where National Grid rolled out the Toxic Utility Smart Grid program, pilot program. And so I had been brought in to speak at that cable station a couple of times. And then I was invited to have my own Tech Safe series with WCCA. So we have about 20 episodes that we've done. In the last couple of months, we've had Senator Michael Moore, who's the sponsor of our smart meter opt-out bill here. And then we've had Libby Kelly, who did the EMF medical conference. We've had Dr. Lisa Naj, who is an environmental medicine specialist. We've had Dr. Holly Groh out of Louisiana, who got a law passed to bring the balance back between technology and what it truly takes to grow a proper child, which is movement, touch, true connections with other living beings, and the natural environment. That's what it takes to grow a proper child, not the shallows of a screen with adults around them who pay no attention to them. So we know what we need to be doing, and I'm so honored for all these interviews. If you have a story you would like to share, please contact me. Sydney, you joined us for one of these interviews as well to talk about the inroads you're making in California, and a device, as a retired school teacher, a device that you went into a volunteer classroom and put around the router so you could be in there without getting radiated. So you are one of our local town heroes, Sydney and Deb, and everybody else who's working so hard out in our communities. So let me know. I want to interview you if you've got something to say. Okay, so here we go. What does the science tell us? First, we're going to look at the long-term effects, and then we're going to look at the short-term effects. So long-term, child and adult cancers. Now, it used to be that cancers took a really long time to develop, 20 or 30 years. Now we're seeing them come on much sooner. And our own government commissioned this study here on the right. The FDA, 2 decades ago, said, gee, it sounds like there's something wrong potentially with cell phones. They commissioned the U.S. National Toxicology Program, which is the gold standard on toxics research, arguably in the world. And they said, go in and see what's up with cell phones. Are they safe? 20 years later, they come out with this groundbreaking report that shows clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. Now, clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories they can assign. Clear evidence of DNA damage, cancerous tumors, and more. The industry gets a hold of these studies and says, oh, that's just one study, keep doing what we're doing. Well, right on the heels of our massive project here in the US, another very large study was done on cell tower base stations in Italy by the Ramazzini Institute, which is an independent research organization. And again, multi-million-dollar study, they found the same things from the cell tower that we found from the cell phones. So we don't need more science. We need public policy to get out of bed with industry and start protecting the public. So, so DNA damage, which is the roadmap to grow a proper anything from a person to a plant to a pollinator to a biome to a tree, And then infertility. And it was when I read these infertility studies that I got on my feet. They've taken male human sperm, exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA. It slowed the motility of the sperm, and it caused far fewer sperm to be viable, also known as apoptosis or programmed cell death, in just 4 hours of exposure to microwave radiation. So that was the day I went, you've got to be kidding me. We had just sent our oldest daughter up to St. Michael's College with her MacBook. Our youngest had just gone into high school, and for Christmas, we gave her a laptop thinking it would give her an edge. And where are both my girls using these devices, but right on top of their reproductive systems. And since I was doing my research, since then, Kaiser Permanente has come out with a really solid study about women's infertility and how there are much higher miscarriage rates when women are around wireless technology. Neurotoxicity has many layers. Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, her research lab. She's a Harvard pediatric neurologist, and she saw huge connections in the families that she was caring for and what we know happens when we use microwave radiation on the brain. Autism. Autism as well. She founded that Autism Lab. I want to just step back to the ADHD. Dr. Hugh Taylor runs the OBGYN program at Yale Medical School, and he's done some of the rodent studies where they expose the pregnant mice, the little mamas, to this cell phone radiation. And when the pups were born, they had abnormal behavior. They were bouncing off the walls, much like a child, not a care in the world, right? Can't focus. And so Dr. Hugh Taylor has partnered with the Environmental Health Trust and others, and they have a beautiful website called the Baby Safe Project. It's a really good place to send people who are new parents or who are thinking of becoming parents or who are pregnant right now. So the Baby Safe Project. Another impact on the brain is Alzheimer's, which, like cancers, used to take decades to start rearing their ugly heads. But now we are seeing Alzheimer's, not just in our 90s, 80s, and 70s, but our 60s, our 50s, our 40s, our 30s, and even in some cases in our 20s, people are getting diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So Dr. Martin Pall has done a really good study on that. And the Environmental Working Group, which I first learned of as a mom, when they were doing all these exposés on the chemicals, the pesticides and herbicides that are used to grow our food. Every year they come out with 2 lists called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen that advise which produce is okay to buy conventionally grown because the chemicals don't get into the food part that you digest, and then which pieces of produce you really ought to get as organically grown as you can. So I had great respect for the Environmental Working Group, and so I'm just thrilled that EWG went after some funding, and they have now been working on the wireless radiation issue for a number of years. And they put out from time to time fact sheets that get out to the public. This one is on protecting kids from wireless radiation in schools and at home. And this one talks about the radio frequency impact on the nervous system and the brain. So we're very grateful when mainstream groups start taking this issue on. And we just have to know that children are especially vulnerable. They are not just little adults. Their very immune system, their central nervous system is still under construction. So we're not even giving them the benefit of growing properly. Their brains have a higher water content. Their skulls are thinner. And as the wonderful Dr. Om Gandhi illustrates for us in this, graphic here, these head models are all turned to the side. So the yellow is the ear. And when an adult puts a cell phone up to the ear, it's radiating about 1/3 of our brains directly. On a 10-year-old child, it's like 3/4 of the way into that child's brain. And on a 5-year-old, that radiation is permeating almost the entire brain. So we've got to get busy on this and protect our children. So let's look now at the short-term effects. Many of you will recognize these in somebody you know or love or yourself. And we should be aware that 20 years ago, the Americans with Disabilities Act already recognized electromagnetic sensitivities, along with multiple chemical sensitivities from injuries from chemicals in the environment. So although we don't hear about it because mainstream media has blocked it, others have known for a very long time in very credible places. So what are the symptoms of microwave radiation? Insomnia is huge. So many people, children and adults, do not sleep right anymore. And if we're not sleeping right, our body can't do its proper cell repair and regeneration at night. And now, for a long time, the industry spun it up that, oh, there's no mechanisms of harm identified in the scientific literature. So let's just, even though it looks like there's something really bad going on, we don't know exactly how it's doing it. So let's keep doing what we've been doing. Now, in addition to the cancers and the infertility and the neurotoxicity, we now understand mechanistically what is happening. With the insomnia, you and I are light beings, meaning that our circadian rhythm operates off of day and night, and each of our organs does a separate thing on that 24-hour clock. Well, in the wee hours of darkness, the pineal gland in the brain releases melatonin. Melatonin then goes in and regulates our sleep, but it also helps to clear the toxins out of the day from everyday cell repair and regeneration. So what happens when we leave these invisible man-made light energy forms pulsating at us 24 hours a day? Our brain's over there going, do, 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 when's it going to get dark so I can release that melatonin? So our brain thinks the lights are on, and in many cases, it's not releasing the melatonin to go in and do what our bodies are built to do with cell repair and cleanup and sleep regulation. Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines, nosebleeds, ear bleeds, chronic fatigue like we've never seen before, pain from unidentified sources. So now our wonderful scientists have helped us determine what is very likely causing this. So in a normal, healthy environment, our red blood cells are free floating and happily bringing oxygen up to all of our cells and organs to allow us to be. When we expose ourselves to radio frequency electromagnetic fields, things start magnetizing, including our red blood cells. And instead of free floating, they're now clumping together and getting deformed. And then that chain of clumped together red blood cells can't get the oxygen to where it needs to go. And so now we start seeing all these terrible symptoms. And as our doctors will tell us, oxidative stress is one of the foundations of most chronic illnesses. So let's fix this, okay? Skin abnormalities, another mechanism of harm is we have little antennas in the surface of our skin that help us to regulate ourselves. Is it too cold? Is it too hot? Gee, let's go inside, or let's put a hat on, right? Our poor skin is getting bombarded with these microwaves, and it's causing skin effects that might include rashes, flushing, heating, a burning sensation. A lot of people talk about the hot ear when they put these radiating devices up to their head. So, and again, our message is not no technology, it's safe technology. Let's keep the amazing part of technology and let's just hardwire it and stop radiating ourselves. And we'll teach you how to do that too. All of our big, beautiful, our organs, our heart, our brain, our lungs, operate through these signals, these little signal whispers that happen all day, all night. And when we overpower our systems with this man-made energy, our poor bodies can't keep up. So some of you may be familiar with something called Schumann's resonance. In our natural world out there on the earth, this scientist named Schumann figured out that 7.83 times a second, the Earth pulses this beautiful energy, these electrons that are free healing vibrations to come into our bodies to regulate our systems. The Earth and us would be in sync at 7.83 pulsations per minute. When we got so fancy with digital technology, we got into the megahertz range. So at 7.83 hertz, that's the cycles per second. In the megahertz range, we are now exposing ourselves to 1 million cycles per second for every hertz. In the gigahertz range, or for every megahertz, in the gigahertz range, we are exposing ourselves to 1 billion cycles per second. How they can cram a billion or a million of anything into a second, I don't know. But what it is this spiked pulsation of microwaves just jackhammering us. And we wonder why so many people don't feel well anymore. Cognitive impairment, the anger, behavior issues, the anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation. Dr. Palpatcher and his colleagues have also long since identified that we have this lovely membrane surrounding our brain called the blood-brain barrier. And they discovered that when we pulsate ourselves with microwaves, it compromises or opens up or breaks that blood-brain barrier. So now as the blood is it's bad enough that we're jackhammering the brain, but another effect is that as the blood is escorting all of these toxins out of our body for everyday cell repair and cleanup, it's meant to just go out through our elimination process. But now that we've opened up the blood-brain barrier, these toxins are traveling into these sensitive areas like our brain and like our gut. So we can't keep doing this. One of the most heartbreaking things I learned at the EMF medical conference is that the doctors are warning us that if we don't get ahead of this, this is biologically changing the gray matter and the white matter of the brain. And it's impacting areas where we used to make good decisions. And they said, if we don't stop doing this, we can expect more of these societal outbursts like we've been seeing with the mass shootings. So we need to find our voice on this and do everything within our considerable power as citizens to start raising this from the grassroots up and empowering our public servants to make this a priority. Because if nobody's talking about it, they have a gazillion other issues they've got to get to. So when we look at the science, we find an additional huge body of scientific evidence of harm about what this is doing to our planet. And again, any of these links in my slides will take you there so you can pound around and learn as much as you care to learn on this. But here's what we know. Our pollinators, our birds, our bees, our butterflies, and everything in between, they are also in a symbiotic relationship with the earth. They have magnetite in their, brains and their beaks and other, built-in navigation systems that are, again, meant to be in sync with the earth's own electromagnetic field. What happens when we put in this huge layer of electropollution is they get dysregulated, or worse, they're little teeny tinies, and they're getting fried by these beams of microwave radiation. And we are already down species by the dozens. And those are the little ones. And we're the big ones. And we are already down in our industrialized nations 50% on our sperm count. So we can't keep doing what we're doing and enjoying the conveniences of all this technology without taking responsibility for deploying it responsibly. Energy consumption. For those who are tuned in and working on projects for this, you need to know that there are so many dark layers to the energy consumption from the technology industry. The minerals that go into all of our devices by the dozens are being extracted through horrid human conditions down in the Congo and elsewhere. The data warehouses, the networks, the personal devices, the streaming that they are pushing, because guess what? These big conglomerate companies that own the telecom industry, the cable industry, they're also buying out the entertainment industry and pushing streaming. Every time we send and receive, every time we charge, every time we recharge, and all the apps we've been seduced into putting on our devices are in the background continuously using energy to update whatever device you're using. So again, the message is not no technology, because once we know better, we can do better. Get rid of all those apps you don't use, disable them when you're not using them. Choose to have safe, hardwired technology, and it's not rocket science. On the back of your router, there's an Ethernet port. Go plug in an Ethernet cable. And then who knew, but you can buy little adapters for each one of your devices. Once you're hardwired, you just go into the settings and turn off the cellular antenna, the data antenna, the Bluetooth antenna, the Wi-Fi antenna, the locator antenna, the hotspot antenna. And for anyone who got talked into upgrading to 5G, you need to go find those antennas and disable them too, because they're all pulsing this radiation all the time, unless you know to turn them off. So there was a Greenpeace analyst as far back as 2012 who crunched the numbers and said, if the cloud were a country, it would be the 5th largest consumer of energy in the world. And that was 11 years ago. And look at how much more we have brought into our world. So we can make huge inroads in climate change if we start talking about technology, energy consumption. So as I'm learning all of this and I'm seeing how solid the science is, my missing piece was, why don't we know? And surely somebody's got to have our backs on this. If this is as bad as little me can go just read science and go, uh-oh, why don't we know? Well, in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this amazing report called Captured Agency, free and online through this link. And they document that our federal agencies, including the FCC, are now being run by these industries. So I love the graphic that they put on their cover, which is this revolving door. And that's exactly the situation we are in with our federal agencies. So that's where I went, uh-oh, there is no cavalry coming. Nobody is going to fix this until the public gets sick enough and educated enough to step up and force the change. So others have also reported on this, and sadly, it goes all the way up to the World Health Organization. There's 2 groups at the WHO who work on electromagnetic radiation. One is basically a sock puppet for the industry, and the other has had scientists and other experts whose life's work is microwave radiation investigation. And it's hard to find because, again, these powers can control what you see through your internet connections. But if you go to this link here, you will see that there is a current investigation reopened because of the science that showed clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, along with all the other science. The WHO is now saying we need to investigate not only those cancers, but the infertility, the impact on children and the elderly, the electromagnetically sensitive, and the environment. So just to give an example of the corruption, here in the US, it was the Food and Drug Administration that commissioned that $30 million study with the National Toxicology Program, but the guys who commissioned that 2 decades ago are long gone, either passed away or retired. We have no expertise in any of our federal agencies who are looking at this issue. So this Dr. Jeffrey Shuren from the FDA, when the report came out determining clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, he goes over to his friends at the FCC and says, hey, nothing to look at here. Let's just keep doing what we said we would do in 1996. Completely disregarding all of the science that was filed in the public record with the FDA. Dr. Shuren says, nah, let's keep doing what we're doing. And one might ask, what would ever possess him to do that? Well, when you look, and you don't have to look very far, go look at his background. You'll find that he's married to a woman who is a partner in a law firm that represents big tech and other industries. So there's nobody coming to protect us. There are some great inroads happening, but we can't wait for people to fix this. We've got to do our part, our civic duty to protect ourselves, our children, our pollinators, and our communities. So that's all the bad news, you guys. Let's talk solutions now. So this is what safe technology looks like. 3 steps. It's not going to break the bank for most people, but look at your router. You'll find there's Ethernet ports in there. Get some Ethernet cables. If you have a lot of different devices, you can get an Ethernet switch. And, you know, this is the one I bought for my house. It's just got 5 little ports on it. So you plug one main cable in from your router and then get separate little cables for each one of your devices and go figure out what adapters you need. Like this is the Lightning adapter for the iPhone. This is the Thunderbolt adapter for the MacBook. These are the devices our family has bought. And then you just plug it in, and then you have to go in to everything and find those antennas and turn them off. And this was meant to be mobile technology. Why are we using it inside our homes? Why is it in our schools? And why is it in our offices? Use your landlines. I called up Verizon the other day and said, how much is it to get a landline back? And they said, oh, like $20 a month. So you can forward your cell phone calls to the landline, right? And then just go into your settings on all your devices. And for the router, I measured and whoo, boy, it was off the charts with radiation. So I called up Verizon at the time and I said, hey, how do I get rid of this radiation? Because we're choosing the much safer hardwired technology connections. They said, oh, that's easy. Sit down at your computer. We'll walk you through it. And they did. They showed me how to get into my account. And then I just had to click on wireless settings. And there I saw it. That box in my utility closet had 2 antennas in it. The 2.4 gigahertz antenna and the 5 gigahertz antenna. And so pulse, pulse, pulse at millions and billions of cycles per second at my family. All I had to do was go off, apply. And then I waited a few minutes and went down and remeasured and literally radio silence. So it can be done. It's intimidating as all get out because we've all been conditioned that this is what we have to live. And we just need the information to do it safely. So the first step is to hardwire everything you can. The second step is to turn off the antennas. And the third step is to measure. Because today, where we are now, the industry is forecasting that with 5G and the Internet of Things, we're going to have more than 200 devices in our homes radiating. 200 devices radiating our families and our loved ones and our pets and our pollinators. So it's invisible. Most devices have multiple antennas, so you really do have to measure to see if you got them all. I wanted to add that our friends at Environmental Health Trust have a small grant fund that if you would like to ask your library to get a radio frequency detection meter, it's not a difficult conversation to have today because our libraries, due to technology, are having to reinvent themselves because not as many people come into this community center to get books anymore. So now a lot of our libraries have a library of things. And so my daughter, for example, is on the wait list for a power washer for her condo. She wants to clean it up a little bit. And that's at the library, a power washer. So it's not out of the realm of requests to say, can we please get a radiation detection meter? Ashland has done it. Newton has done it. Pittsfield, Massachusetts have done it. And people around the country are doing this. So if your library cannot afford to do that, or can only partially fund it, reach out to the Environmental Health Trust, and they have a small grant fund that they may be able to help you with, but the request cannot come from you. It has to come from your library. They'll coordinate with the library and then put it into circulation. So thank you to Theodora Scarrato, Deborah Davis, and your team at the Environmental Health Trust. All right. So So far, what we presented is really the hardcore facts that you need to keep yourself and your loved ones safe. In the second half of this presentation, I'm going to go through it a little bit more quickly and just show you what's here. So as you digest and want to learn a little bit more, you know how to come back and find these resources. We invite you back every single time. We do these 2 free webinars twice a month. And people will come and learn a little, fix a little, come back, learn a little more, go home, fix a little more, then maybe start working on their offices or maybe their community. So come back as often as you want. We're just here to help you connect the dots and provide you with the resources to help you get it right, or as right as we can. So in addition to our own personal devices, there are other areas of exposure that I mentioned, and those include the smart meters that really aren't so smart. These are replacing what were called analog meters. Those were just straightforward mechanical devices that were put on our homes to measure our consumption of gas, water, and electric. The industry started approaching our towns and saying, hey, we know you guys have to pay all of the walkers that go from home to home every month and take the readings to do the billing with. We have a cost save for you using technology. We can install digital meters on the homes. And the first phase was they would have a Department of Public Works person drive through the neighborhood, which is much faster than walking, stick a scanner out the window and point it at your home. It will pick up the radio frequency radiation signal, and then they have that data to do your billing with. So those are the drive-bys. And then they came up with this smart grid that they're trying to roll out, and they're putting smart meters on our homes that transmit wirelessly to a collection point on a pole somewhere in the neighborhood that then gathers up everybody's aggregate data and sends that off to the utility company to do billing. And again, it sounds like a great cost save for our town if it didn't come with many public safety risks. One of them, in addition to just pulsing this radiation 24/7, one of the properties of radio frequency radiation is it likes metal. It amplifies on metal. So it can hop on the wires and the pipes of your home and travel all over your home and turn your home into this one big virtual giant antenna that's radiating. There are far too many stories reported in the news about fires and explosions, improper grounding. If there's a surge on the power line, these things can blow and houses go down. So data harvesting and privacy issues abound. Anybody can get a hold of this data information on how we're using appliances and everything in our homes. That's all part of the smart grid. These are collection meters for everything you're doing in your home. So it's a huge privacy issue. And at the medical conference, they said what we're seeing come through the door in our medical practices is that when these smart meters go in, or these digital meters go in, we see it is a major trigger for microwave sickness. And it's an environmental justice issue here in Worcester, Massachusetts. The industry came in through National Grid and rolled out their pilot program. Not only did they go way over budget and then turn around and try and make the customers pay for that mismanagement of this project, but it was making people sick as well. And they do this routinely, these toxic industries. They'll go out into communities that are classified as environmental or social justice communities, where it's often low income, high minority populations who may not have the language skills to understand what's going on around them. They may be working 2 or 3 jobs just to keep a roof over their head and food on the table. They don't have the bandwidth to tune into what's happening around them in their community, and they're easy prey for these toxic industries. So they come in, they roll it out, and what National Grid did here in Massachusetts is they turned around to our neighbors in Rhode Island and Connecticut, New York, and said, hey, look, we did this great program in Massachusetts. Get with the times, come on. You guys need to have these smart meters in your community too. And there are people fighting this all across the United States. But these industries just buy our governments and they just do whatever they want to do. So it takes us as citizens, again, to educate them on the balance of what industry is not telling them. And then together we put on the pressure to start making better decisions. So Jeremy Johnson is a Silicon Valley engineer, married to a medical doctor. They both became very sick very suddenly, and nothing in her medical background could crack the code on what was going on. They did their research though and figured it out. They started getting sick when this bank of smart meters showed up on their condo. And I know, you know, engineers are so gifted, so talented, and so wonderful, but they've only ever been asked to make it faster, make it better. They've never been tasked to make it safe. So it's really hard to open this conversation with engineers and physicists and technologists. They're all excited about the new technologies, and they don't want to hear that they've been harming people. But anybody with an open mind is welcome to go listen to Jeremy's TEDx talk. And in 15 minutes, they'll get a really good understanding from one of their own peers of what this issue is. Dr. Alexia McKnight is a veterinarian. She's a veterinary radiologist who works with man-made radiation. She knows the protections they need to take for the ionizing radiation, which is so powerful that it breaks the atom. But she had no idea about non-ionizing radiation till smart meters went in on her home, and she got so sick. You know, the neurotoxicity kicked in so fast. She was out in traffic and could not remember if green lights meant stop or go. 50-50 choice to make there. Thank goodness she made the right one and got home safely. So Dr. McKnight has also done a TEDx talk. So lots of great resources from highly credible people. Cell towers are another one that if we don't work with our towns to get our zoning code as strong as we can, they wind up in our neighborhoods. And just last night, I was educating our planning board here in Massachusetts. Their predecessors decades ago allowed the industry to put cell tower antennas on top of a water tank in a very densely populated neighborhood. It used to be that cell towers were off in the distance in industrial zoned areas, 300 feet up in the air. And then they started encroaching closer and closer and closer and closer. And now the industry has convinced everybody that if they can paint it the same color as the structure, they can just put them right on buildings. So let's look at some of the facts. It's important to look at the non-industry funded science. And in the epidemiological studies, and that wasn't a word I was really familiar with, but it means scientists who study what's happening in society as opposed to in the lab or inside the body of whatever little critter or human they're investigating. So epidemiological studies are showing us that when they looked where these cell towers are mounted, and they looked at neurotoxicity and death, they found that this death and neurotoxicity curve starts to come down at about 500 meters, and that's 1,640 feet. At a minimum, it starts to come down, but it doesn't actually start catching up to the death rates and the neurotoxicity rates in the general population until double that. So 500 meters is just like a halfway compromise here. Anybody with health compromises, anybody who's elderly or a child or a pregnant woman, all of those vulnerable subpopulations should be at least a half a mile away, according to the science. So it's important to look at the non-industry funded science, not what industry is telling us. And you can go out to a website called antennasearch.com and put in any address here in the US, and it will give you a 3-mile radius of where the cell towers are and all these other antennas that have been mounted. And when I look in my neighborhood, we're about 40 minutes outside of Boston, so out in the suburbs a little bit. And there are a couple hundred of these within 3 miles of my home. When I put in the State House address right in the middle of downtown Boston, there were 1,520 towers and more than 4,500 of these cell antennas. So we are getting inundated with man-made microwave radiation. And now it's getting closer and closer to us with 5G or 5th generation technology. So the gist of 5G is it means 5th generation. Every 10 years, it seems, we come up with a new generation and a new way of accessing technology. It used to be generation 1 with cell phones, generation 2, we started being able to do a little texting on our phones in addition to the calls. Generation 3, we now had access to the internet. And then 4th generation brought basically a whole computer right down to either our wrists or our cell phones or our tablets. 5th generation technology. They're spinning it up that we're going to have faster entertainment downloads. And remember, they're buying the entertainment industry. They're touting their smart cities and super highways. That's what they're promising. But we need to understand what it is. It's not getting rid of these longer wavelengths that can penetrate into our structures. That's how it reaches your devices indoors, is these long wavelengths. They still need them as the backbone for 5G. So 5G is adding these shorter waves. That's all that's left to monetize right now. They've maxed out the profitability on the auctions for these longer waves with 3G and 4G. So no more new money to be made there. So now they're seeing what they can do with these little millimeter waves. So they're spinning it up that we're going to have so much faster stuff. But these little millimeter waves are little. They get disrupted by anything in their path, be it a tree. Industry comes in under the cover of dark sometimes and lops off the trees. It can also be dysregulated by bad weather with rain or snow. So it's crummy technology that they're piling into these other frequencies that are already harmful enough. So here's some illustrations of what some things look like. They mount them on poles. They put them on wires. They're stuffing them under manhole covers. They're hiding them behind facades. And their goal, because these little waves can't carry stuff very far, their solution is to put in more cell towers that they're calling small cells. And they will be putting them, and they already are putting them, every 2 to 12 houses outside our bedrooms in our public access way. That's what 5G small cells are. It's bringing cell towers right outside your home. They are clear-cutting trees at a time when our towns, our sustainability committees are recognizing that we can't cut down trees. We have to build up the tree canopies to cool the earth. And especially inside of our cities, there's a lot of projects going on to put trees in to cool our streets, to protect the little kids running around and everything else. And here's the industry just coming in and decimating the trees so their cruddy little 5G signals can get by. And so with great work from Blake Levitt in Connecticut and others, they met with Senator Richard Blumenthal, Senator Blumenthal, and he went into DC to a congressional hearing with the Commerce Committee and said to the industry, so please tell us, how much money have you invested in independent science to prove that 5G is safe before it comes to market? And these two industry guys just sat there and kind of went humana, and ultimately had to admit that there has been no safety testing done on this technology that is now showing up literally at the curb outside of our homes. And then, insult to injury, Computer World and others are already publishing articles saying 5G is a bad joke. It's a great revenue stream for the industry, but we're not getting any faster signals. And there went Verizon last year, boasting through their press releases that 100 million people are now going to have 5G. And this is what it looks like in Boston. These are all 5G small cell antennas on top of the 4,500 massive macro cell antennas. So I'm grateful to Dr. Andrew Goldsworthy in the UK, who's been a scientist on this for a long time. He indicated that one of the other things the industry would prefer that we not know is that our biological cells only have so much energy. and they are pretty well calibrated to get us through our everyday activity and then do cell repair and regeneration at night. So what happens when we leave this man-made toxic exposure pulsating at us up all day and all night? Well, our poor bodies cannot keep up. So Dr. Rob Brown and Dr. Beverly Rubik came up with this study that shows evidence for a connection between coronavirus 19 and exposure to radio frequency radiation from wireless communications, including 5G. And we are not saying by any stretch that 5G caused the pandemic, but once you learn the facts, it's not rocket science to figure out, holy moly, my body doesn't have enough energy to fight this stuff off, let alone add a virus on top of it, and our bodies just don't have it to keep us healthy and strong. So we have to start removing these environmental exposures. And I will tell you that usually when a paper is up for publication, it goes through something called peer review. And that means that other experts in this field are brought in to look at your paper and see if you followed proper scientific protocol. And usually you would have a couple few peer reviewers. They had 15 or 16 experts peer review this paper because they knew the industry was going to try to kill it. And thank goodness they were able to finally get it published. And a lot of the trade journals today are now run by industry too. So the fact that they got this published was nothing short of a miracle and determination. So that's where all of our toxic exposures are coming from. And Dr. Magda Havas, who was co-chair of the most recent medical conference, she is professor emeritus, which means she retired with honors from Trent University. And she taught electromagnetism for 25 years up there. She knows that our governments are dropping the ball on this. And so she started a project to get citizen scientists like you and I to get a hold of one of these radio frequency detection meters and get out in our communities and start measuring what is really happening, and then enter that data. You know, we go out in the community, bring a friend, one of you can measure with their little protocol and another can write it down on the clipboard, and then just go enter it into her database. And then we can gather the data and say, hey, can you brag about your town? And that's the acronym for her project, is BRAG. Are you in the blackout area? Is your town in the red danger zone? Is it amber, getting out of the safety area? Or are you green? So BRAG, black, red, amber, green. In the scientific literature, they want us to be at 1,000 or less of these microwatts per square meter. And so let's look at what things look like in reality. 1,000 or less. Lori Schreier, who's part of New Hampshire for Safe Tech, she went and measured out at her fire station. It was in the green. In Keene, New Hampshire, and this was done a couple of years ago before the pandemic, they were starting to inch up into the amber, but industry got in there and they have now put these small cells right outside people's homes. So we could do with a new measurement in Keene. Nashua was already in the red. Concord, the capital in New Hampshire, already in the red. Stratham, New Hampshire, where Deb and this wonderful representative Patrick Abrami live, they're already in the blackout zone because they put a cell tower up right at the top of their main drag. And here in the north end of Boston, wow, over 500,000. And industry sweet talked their way in to putting this technology in at the curb because they want to be there where the people are. And Hanover Street in the north end of Boston is a huge tourist attraction. So people are there all the time. And of course, the industry is pushing their technology and product at the public buys it, and then they need to be able to connect. So they come in and they start putting these in. Now, at first blush, this looks like a really pretty wrought iron lamppost, but in reality, it's a cell tower right at the curb where everybody is walking. And then above our wonderful Italian restaurants and bakeries, there are living situations. So now they are putting these cell towers literally at the curb right outside people's homes. And what they did is they put the pretty ones up down Hanover Street, which is the main strip. And as you walk down Hanover and look to the left and the right, you see they put in these ugly gray monopoles literally right outside people's bedroom windows. So This is what our world looks like today until you and I get busy on this. And we take inspiration from Dr. Martin Luther King. He taught us when important changes finally begin to happen in society, it comes through 3 channels. 1, the public learns and gets engaged, which is what we're hoping to inspire with our work here with you today. 2, it goes through the courts, and we've got some great news to report. Not there yet, but really important inroads happening. And public policy finally catches up, and we have laws to protect us. So let's look at each of those areas. We've already talked a lot about what we can do as citizens for ourselves. Legal solutions. So remember when Dr. Jeffrey Shuren went over to the FCC and said, we don't believe that $30 million study, keep doing what we've been doing. Once the FCC formally reported out that they were not going to change their radiation limits, they had to file that in something called the Federal Register. Once that determination hit the Federal Register, then the lawsuits could begin. And the Environmental Health Trust, which we've mentioned with Dr. Deborah Davis and Theodora Scorato and all of their amazing board members and staff, they filed a lawsuit. Children's Health Defense filed a lawsuit. And some of you may know that Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has been fighting environmental polluters for decades. That's what his whole career has been. He was brought into the loop on the wireless radiation issue with great thanks to attorney Daphne Tackover. And so Children's Health Defense filed a lawsuit, and then others around the country did too. And the courts combined it all into one, and they labeled it Environmental Health Trust et al. Versus the FCC. And so this lawsuit, these things take years, but at the end of the day, the attorneys for the good guys took everything that was in this public docket, all this scientific, medical, and citizen evidence of harm that had been filed with the FCC. They printed it, they organized it, and put it into 27 volumes and gave that big fat binders to these 3 judges at the federal level at the DC Circuit Court of Appeals and said, here's the facts. The judges are looking at all of this, and they're looking at the FCC and going, so how did you determine it's okay to stick with these outdated public radiation limits from 1996 when we didn't even have all this technology? And the FCC attorneys went, well, the FDA said it was okay. So of course the judges asked, well, where's the FDA's homework? And as we know, not one of our federal agencies has ever done the review on this. So we have a huge regulatory gap. And so the courts ruled against the FCC. They found them to be arbitrary and capricious. I had to go look that up. And it means they made it up. They didn't do their homework. So the court sent it back to the FCC to account for, cancer aside, account for the infertility, the electromagnetic sensitivity, the impact on children, on the elderly, on the environment. And I will tell you, it's been over 2 years and the FCC has done nothing. And apparently our federal courts don't like to tell our agencies what to do. They give them the chance to go back and fix it, and they've done nothing. So that there have been appeals that have been filed against that. And so again, it just plays out forever and ever in the court systems. And we probably got a couple more year wait on that. So, but that was huge, because now you can go to your friends in your towns who are saying, oh, it's fine, it's fine. The FCC says it's fine. You can go say, look at this lawsuit. It is so not fine. And there are many, many other things that are happening around the country. And I encourage you to take a look at these. So that FCC lawsuit was groundbreaking. I do want to highlight out in Pittsfield, where I told you that a Verizon cell tower went up on top of this neighborhood, made 17 children and adults so sick that they had to abandon their homes. Well, the citizens have fought so hard there. And after a year and a half, their mayor and city council ordered their board of health to investigate. And they did. And they did an excellent job. Realized what had happened. They had doctors' diagnosis. They met with the scientists. They met with engineers. They met with industry, and came up at the end of the day with an emergency order for Verizon to come to the table in the next 7 days, else they will issue a cease and desist order to Verizon. Verizon is probably one of the worst partners in a community. They did not come to the table in those 7 days. At the 11th hour, they went to the court and they ordered an injunction against the Board of Health saying, we're protected by the FCC. We don't have to listen to this. Well, meanwhile, the Board of Health had gone to the Massachusetts State Level Association of Health Boards and had talked to them about this and learned that there were likely 2 pathways that they could take and take this through the courts. Sum total of both pathways would have been in the $80,000 mark, which for a town and their funds that they manage in emergencies and stuff is not a big deal. So the Board of Health was being bullied now by their mayor and their city council, who are deep in bed with industry, certain members anyway. And the Board of Health got bullied into rescinding their emergency order. So with great thanks to Children's Health Defense and these families who will not stop, Children's Health Defense now has a lawsuit to get the Board of Health empowered to remove that injunction, get the Board of Health empowered to do their jobs, because what we believe they have figured out is that that Telecom Act only applies to the application process and the citing of this technology that's so harmful. Once it goes up, if there is harm in the community or nuisance, it is legally the responsibility of the boards of health to get rid of that and make it right in the community. So we're all waiting for that ruling to come down from the court here. The judge took a look at the preliminary information and said, yes, we will hear this. And so the judge has the information now, and we are waiting on that. So lots of really great things happening, but nothing happens fast. And there are only so many attorneys who specialize in this, and they are way overburdened. So there's no cavalry coming. We have to work it at the local level. So policy solutions usually come at the tail end of all of this work. And here's the bill that Rep. Abrami put together with these pointed questions. Why have Lloyd's of London, Swiss Re, AM Best, and others long since recognized this as a leading world-class problem? And they put exclusions in their policies, so that can leave our towns legally liable if they did not put in their zoning code that the insurance, that these industries have to prove that they're covered with the insurance. We talked about that legal fine print. We talk about these thousands of studies the FCC is ignoring. Why aren't they accounting for the non-heat related biological effects? And why does our country allow 100 times more radiation than other countries? Well, we have the manufacturers here, and they own us. And then why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect? If you've got children in a school, every classroom has wireless access points in most areas mounted right on top of the children and the teachers. And at task level, they've been given these devices. The pandemic was like a gold mine for the industry because their goal was to get a one-to-one device in the hand of every child. And what did we do in COVID-19? We gave every child a radiating device to access their education from home, but we didn't teach them to hardwire them and turn off the antennas. So it was shocking to me, but not surprising. When the kids returned to school, we had reports in the news here from 3 different school districts where the children were literally beating on their classmates with their tablet because they cannot regulate their brain anymore to regulate their behavior. So this is happening in real time. I just met a woman at my yoga studio who's a teacher in the social services at school. And she told me that one of their teachers was out on disability because one of the kids came after the teacher with the tablet and beat her up with it too. So nothing short of a miracle. We've had bills here in Massachusetts for 10 years that have come out of committee favorably. but never got passed into law. Through the great efforts of Deb and her colleagues and scientists and doctors who came and testified with us in New Hampshire and other citizens, in less than a month, in 7 years, we got a bill passed through the House, through the Senate, and under the governor's pen that by law, they had to form a commission and spend 1 year investigating and come out with a report. Even during the pandemic, even while the government shut down, they stuck to their deadline. And we have this groundbreaking report from New Hampshire that documents everything we have taught you today in a state level commission report. This and the Pittsfield emergency order are arguably the two greatest documents we've got in our country today. So use these resources, start the conversation credibly in your town, and they document the corruption with the FCC, the industry, the FDA, the industry. It's all in there. And they make 15 recommendations that wireless technology is no longer advanced technology. We need to be investing in our homes and in our communities with fiber optics or high-speed cable or copper right to the premises. And then we simply pick up with wires on the inside and turn off the radiation. What that does from the industry's push for more capacity is we will not need cell towers anywhere near us. They can be placed far off in the distance and we can still have access on the go, but we do not need to have wireless technology at close range. It will never close the digital divide if you're sitting there making people sick. Hardwiring fiber optics to and through the premises is where we need to go. So lots of resources, experts telling you what these bills were, what they did, what they took out of the bills and came back and did new bills in the subsequent sessions. Every single time we thought we had really excellent inroads, industry came in and did what they do. And then these politicians said, no, we're killing this bill. So we can't wait for others to fix this, but we've got to keep moving the needle in the legal and the political areas as well. So when we get to that tipping point, we've got it all queued up and ready to go. So this is what they did this year in New Hampshire. Maine came out with a good bill to try and do what New Hampshire did with their commission. Connecticut had a great bill with small cells and smart meters. We've had bills here. You're welcome to watch our hearing testimonies. Let's form a commission. Let's protect the kids. Let's protect our schools. Let's get, at least as a first step, give us a choice to opt out without penalizing us with a fee on these so-called smart meters. And then just hardwire those to the premises, get rid of the radiation. And then this has become a big civil rights issue because disability no longer means a wheelchair ramp for accommodations. Let's see. Up in Canada, one of the largest grocery conglomerates started doing hours with low environments where people with sensitivities could come in, because there are all sorts of sensory issues now that we know about with children with ADD, with ADHD, for people on the autism spectrum, and now we know with people who are electromagnetically sensitive. So Canada started doing this in some of their stores where from a certain hour or a day of the week, you can come in and they'll lower all the lighting, they'll turn off the music. So there's no sensory overload. They're training their employees to speak in soft tones. They are eliminating loud activity in the store, like gathering up all the shopping carts and all the clashing that goes with that. So Walmart has just recently announced that every day now from 8 to 10 a.m., they are creating a low sensory environment. And so it's critically important that we update our civil rights laws at the state and federal level to make accommodations for what today's disabilities look like. And it's far more than just physical disabilities with these invisible disabilities that the environment has brought to us. So very grateful for that bill. And then a new bill that we have in Massachusetts is we already have a state level database that our healthcare practitioners and our local boards of health have access to. So let's say if somebody gets food poisoning, they enter that into the database. If somebody's got COVID, they enter that into the database. Somebody has Parkinson's, they enter that into the database, and then they can run reports, and with better data, they can make better public health decisions. So we are now asking that electromagnetic sensitivity be added into MAVEN, which is our database here in Massachusetts, because right now nobody is tracking how many people are sick from this. And then with that data, we can make better choices. So these bills are ongoing. We are supporting them, but we need the public to step up and support them too. Because with everybody, our plates were too full to begin with. If nobody's talking about this issue to our legislators, they're going to go where the voices are the loudest. So there are bills filed all over the country, and you're welcome to see the bills in other states. And one thing the industry does when they come into our towns who know no better, they will say, and if here's an application, we're going to put cell towers in. And if anybody says anything, gosh, that's just the NIMBYs. Don't listen to the not in my backyard people. And it's so not true. If you go out to Americans for Responsible Technology, you will see that across our nation, we have more than 150 groups that have formed over this issue to get the right for safe technology. And so if you are running solo by now, please know, don't be alone. Don't go it alone, because you'll get swept under the rug very quickly. Organize and get others around you organized. Go out and see if there are groups already nearby. Go see what lessons they've learned. There's a toolkit at this link with Americans for Responsible Technology that will teach you how to formulate a group, tools right at your fingertips to get it done. So, the industry says, oh, nobody else cares. But look here in Massachusetts, we have had so many successes fighting cell towers if we get our zoning code up to speed. If they come in and hand you an application to your planning board or your zoning board, and you don't have your zoning code up to speed, there's not enough time to get your zoning code fixed before the shot clock on that application says you have to give us a determination. So you've got to be proactive with your towns. And I've been talking to my town at Ashland, Massachusetts about this for over a decade, and they have done nothing to take that warning. And now we've got all this close range toxic technology. So let's get out there and fix our bylaws and make it as strong as we can for any new technology coming in, and then support everybody working at the federal level to change those corrupt laws that have a little bit of our hands tied. Okay, so, again, just to inspire you, there are towns that have been taking responsibility for this and working on it. So the more we empower our towns, the better it's going to get. There was a grandmother in Easton, Connecticut who figured it out. She brought it to her town, and they have put a moratorium on it. And they re-upped their moratorium this year until 5G can be proven safe. So be inspired. Just in the last month and a half, experts who I've mentioned today were brought in, and they presented to the Stanford Board of Representatives. And they just rejected this awful plan that the industry crafted with the governor to go into the 5 largest cities in Connecticut and start putting 5G small cell antennas on the poles outside people's homes. And thank goodness for our experts, and thank goodness for public servants who do their homework, and they rejected the governor's plan. So it can be done. So just learn, see what the resources are, and please, let's start with protecting our kids in the schools. There is no law saying that we cannot protect our kids in the schools. We choose to put those wireless access points in there. We choose to put a tablet in a hand and radiate a child. We can stop doing that. So many, many excellent resources for us in our schools. I can be brought in to help educate. But just know curriculum already exists, professional development already exists. The New York Times did an expose on what Silicon Valley execs do. They send their kids to schools with no technology, not wireless, not hardwired. They know a child doesn't develop properly in front of a screen. So many, many resources. You open the door, bring me in, and we will help to educate in your community. There are just as many excellent resources for the healthcare practitioners. The first medical school textbook just came out this year. And now we have the EMF Medical Conference. Dr. Cindy Russell and others have built this website called Physicians for Safe Technology, which is highly credible to send your healthcare team to. And then the engineers, physicists, technologists. Here are so many good resources to just help build out your knowledge base. Don't just take a snarky attitude and think you know better. Go learn the balance of the facts. Home and work solutions. If you're not a do-it-yourselfer, please know an electrician can come in, run wires to put Ethernet ports in the rooms where you use your technology. It's not rocket science to fix. There are building biologists who can come in and take measures of other exposures. Maybe there's dirty electricity that wasn't done right. Maybe you need to know about that. Maybe you need to know about mold or VOCs or formaldehyde. These are highly trained consultants who are certified to come in and take measurements of all these exposures. In addition, some have gotten the EMRS or electromagnetic radiation specialist. So go there, hire an expert. Generation Zapped is a very easy way to start this conversation. It's an award-winning film that actually my little, 2 seconds of fame with Ashland Public Schools being the first in the nation to take measures. It was part of the United Nations Film Festival. It won Best Documentary at the DC and the Women's Independent Film Festivals. And it's now available on Amazon Prime. Our libraries now have it through their streaming services in many towns. So Bert Wolf does a travel show. He's done 2 episodes with some of the experts. And then our friends at Americans for Responsible Technology have the toolkit laid out right there for you to go get familiar with. So we need to remember the monkey see, monkey do. If our kids and the children around us see how we use technology in an unhealthy way, that just gives them permission to do the same. So it's important for us to start looking, just observe what you do, and then how can you start minimizing to a healthy level? And we've got to model it. This book, The Earth Prescription, for any of you who understand the science behind grounding or earthing, we've talked about those healthy electrons. This Dr. Laura Conover has come out with a book to teach us how to get back outside and healthfully reconnect. And you don't actually have to take your shoes off to do it if you've got snow on the ground. She's wonderful. And then I love this poster, 50 Ways to Take a Break. We don't remember boredom anymore because we just hop on a screen. We need boredom. That's where brilliance does its manifestations. Our brain needs time to process and to think, not to just be crammed with all this garbage. And the good stuff, even from the good stuff, we need a break online. So all these wonderful things, get out, go dancing, go help a neighbor, go walk in the park, go write a song, go write a poem, just do good, kind acts of service. So those resources are there. And then at the municipal level, once you get around what you're doing in your own hometown and your own home, then start rippling out. What can you do to protect your town? Because again, nobody's coming to fix this for you. So it takes a lot of courage. Our government at the Centers for Disease Control has something already called the ALARA principle. And their goal with man-made radiation is to get to as low as reasonably achievable. They use a 3-pronged approach. 1, create as much distance from something that's radiating. That's common sense. 2, spend as little amount of time radiating yourself as you can. That's common sense. And 3, if you cannot get away from it, do your best to shield yourself from it. That's why we wear those lead aprons when we get x-rays and stuff. So the same 3 principles of time, distance, and shielding apply to this other form of man-made radiation at the low level, non-ionizing end of the spectrum. So that should be our guiding principle, as low as reasonably achievable. And it's important to investigate. We've got great resources. This is my research repository for municipal leaders. You can print that out, bring it with you when you start talking, get a meter, show them what the radiation is, and then say, let's use the checklist at Americans for Responsible Technology and see where we are with our zoning code and what we may need to beef up so that as industry pushes all this new stuff in, we can protect ourselves to the maximum under current law. And always remind ourselves that we are here to protect our priorities, not the industries. And so Reinventing Wires is free and online. And this teaches our communities why wireless infrastructure is such a raw deal for our towns, from the energy to the sustainability to the health and everything in between. The equipment is poor with wireless. It's got to be replaced all the time. Fiber optics lasts for 50 years, not 3 years. So all the reasons that our towns just need some help learning about, it's all there. And again, always measure not against what the industry is telling us or the FCC, because that doesn't protect us, but against the biological levels, and the numbers are readily available. So next steps, we cannot kid ourselves. There is no safe level of man-made radiation in the scientific literature. Dr. Linda Birnbaum, who oversaw the National Toxicology Program, she said there are some really good people still at the federal level, so we don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but she knows we have captured agencies. And she said it's probably going to have to bubble up from the grassroots up to the local, to the state, to the federal, before meaningful action is going to happen in the law. So let's do our best to educate the public. We always have these sessions posted at Massachusetts for Safe Technology, and we do them twice a month for you and everybody you talk to about this to come learn together. And I can be brought in to do trainings in your town, in your work, in your schools, in your home. I've been brought into people's homes to do education sessions with 20 or 30 people. But please, guys, let's make it a priority in the coming year to protect our kids, especially in school with these industrial strength Wi-Fi systems. And start where you are. Do you belong to a professional organization? Do you belong to a mom's club? Bring me in. Let's get the education out there so we can start feeling confident enough to get on this. So next steps locally, all our towns should be doing safety committees. It's here to stay. So let's do tech safely. They cannot keep imposing these toxic smart meters on our homes. We need to opt out and then force the industry to hardwire them so we don't need the radiation, get our public spaces hardwired, and get our zoning bylaws in ship shape. And tell our town, most of our town attorneys will admit they are not experts in telecom law. So let's hire the experts who know the law inside out. Somebody like Andrew Campanelli used to work for industry until he figured out that they are deploying very toxic technology. Now he helps take things to court, and he also helps to look at zoning bylaws for $8,500. He can look at what your zoning is, look at your state laws, and look at the federal law, which he already knows inside out. So tell our towns, please bring in an expert. And I'm happy to announce that that just happened in Burlington, Massachusetts this month. We helped to inform them of the public safety risks, and they voted 7-0 to hire a consultant to come in and help them. So for today, look around, notice what's radiating, be gentle with yourself and your loved ones. Inside me, there's a crazy lady jumping up and down going, we're frying our frickin' kids and our families and our pollinators, and we can't keep doing. But if we lead with that, that ignites the amygdala and people are looking for an exit. So we can't put people in fight, flight, or freeze. We need to be fact-based, and we need to provide them with the resources to come up to speed and then teach them what can be done. So for yourselves, create a sleep sanctuary as soon as you can so your body can help you during the night. And then make your way to the Ethernet cables and the adapters and turn off all the antennas as a first step too. A lot of people just say, why do I have my cell phone on all the time? I'm going to set an alarm because the alarm and the clock and the camera and everything that's on a device is there to enjoy. You don't need radiation to make that work. Set a timer to go off every half hour or hour. Put the radiating device away from you. Only turn on the one antenna you need for the service that you want, be it a cellular or data or Bluetooth or whatever. Keep all the other antennas off. Set it away from you. Do upload, download real quick, and then put it back in airplane mode before you pick it up and start composing your responses. Then set it away again, go active, upload, download. But preferentially, when you're not on the go, don't radiate. Use hardwired connections. And there are resources at every turn. Look at these lovely samples from the Environmental Health Trust. So thank you guys. We know it's like drinking water out of a fire hose when we do these 2-hour presentations, but we thought about doing it in smaller chunks, but that means you got to find time in your very busy schedule to come back again. We just like to put it all out there for you and know you are welcome back all the time. If you go to Massachusetts for Safe Technology, or you use this ma4safetech@gmail.com email, it comes right to me. We're very accessible. So let us know how we can help you line up resources to help yourself and your community. And then there's also New Hampshire for Safe Technology. And Deb, if you can pop your email address for New Hampshire for Safe Technology in there, and your Facebook page. I apologize, that dropped off my last slide and I didn't put it back in. Yeah, I had to modify that presentation when I did the Marian Institute and I forgot to put it back in, so my apologies. Are there any questions or comments that people would like to share before we wrap up today?
There weren't any in the chat.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody who joined us today. If you want to raise your hand and say anything, you are more than welcome to do that at this point. But other than that, we wish you all very peaceful holidays. Thank you for giving us your time today. And if we can help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out. All right, everybody. Thanks so much and have a tech safe day.
Thank you, Cece. Thank you, everyone, for coming.